When you're asking for donations for your nonprofit, here's how to calculate exactly how much to ask for to make sure that you're not over or under asking. When you're building a profile on a donor, trying to decide how much money to ask for, of course you don't want to aim low because you're going to leave money on the table, but if you ask high, are you going to offend them, or are they going to think that you didn't do your research or you don't know enough about them? So we want to try to get this right, obviously, but the way I like to think about this is kind of an incomplete picture. So say you have kind of a box here, and each new piece of information fills in a different square of the box. You'll start out and you have this kind of grid situation here, and none of the grid is filled in. You don't know what any of these boxes. If we had the complete picture, we'd know exactly what to do, but the idea is we want to try to fill in one box at a time. And even if we don't have all the boxes filled in, if we have like that many of the boxes filled in, we can probably get a pretty good idea of what's in the picture and then get pretty close. So none of these are a perfect science, but the more of them you can use, the more of these different pieces you can use to kind of put together how much to ask for, the closer you're going to get. So we're going to talk about what each of these pieces are and how to calculate them. Okay, first and foremost, ask high. This is just kind of a general principle that we start with, but say if you're unsure, like, is this a donor who could maybe do a $10,000 gift? Or maybe they're at 25K, or they've given 10 or 25K to other charities before, but they've never given us this much, so how would we know that they would even want to? When in doubt, we're just gonna aim high. You're never going to offend somebody by asking high. No one ever thinks, oh, that's so inconsiderate, they think I have all this money. People may say, I'm flattered that you think I could give at that level, here's this level here. So the soft start is if you're taking a wild guess and you're unsure between 2 or 3 amounts and you're just trying to dial it in, the basic is just ask high. They will bring you down to their ceiling, or you may even be able to negotiate a different time frame. They say, well, I can't do $10,000, but if I had a couple of years to pay that off, or if I had a payment plan, or want to do monthly donations for the next 4 years, I could get to that $10,000 level. That's still better than asking low and then having to go back to that donor again to finish that gift. So you may as well extend the time frame and ask high. So that's kind of the first start. So if you remember nothing else, at least ask high. Number 2, of course, is BS, which stands for be specific, obviously. You want to be super, well, that ran out of room, but be specific this way. You want to be super specific on the number that we're asking for. This is actually the thing that fundraisers mess up, I think, probably the most often. It's also the mistake that I made the most when I was starting out in this industry over a decade ago now, is to ask like, oh, well, how much do you think you might want to give? We may be able to ask questions like that in our qualifications meeting, or as we're kind of talking to the donor and learning a little bit about them. But for the most part, 99 times out of 100, you should ask for a very specific amount. Now, even if that amount is wrong, you're like, well, but I feel like I'm guessing here, I'm just shooting from the hip here, I'm just kind of going in the dark. It's still better to be a specific amount than to give them a range. People tend to pick the low end of the range, even if they're generous, even if they're excited, but we want to be, hey, I thought of you in this specific gift size because this amount does this. So that specific amount is not just arbitrary. It's not because I just picked $25,000 out of the air, but it's to say because we're wanting to do X, Y, and Z. I have this amount that's $25,000 because if we can get $25,000, we will be able to fund or purchase or program or buy this thing. So we're centering the gift around the outcome. Centering the gift around the outcome instead of the gift amount. So they're not really focused on, like, the amount's the amount. It is what it is. But the reason I chose this number is so that I can do this. It also helps kind of frame why we're asking for this amount. It's like, well, we had you down on the list for $50,000. It's like, who had me down? What list? Where did you even get to this number? Whereas if I can say, well, we would like to fund our pet therapy program for the next year. That's a full-time salary for a social worker. So if we can get $50,000, we certainly will be able to do that for the next year, or whatever. Pick your cause, pick your thing. But we talk about that end goal and then work our way backwards. To that is what this number means, and that's what we pitch to the donor. So it feels like we're pitching an outcome, something tangible, some kind of meaningful change, as opposed to trying to pitch, oh, this is the number that we think you can give because this is how wealthy we think you are. Totally fine for us to approach it that way, but when we present it to the donor, make sure that we're outcome focused. Hey, thanks for checking out our video. If you're getting value out of this but would like something more personalized, you can book 30 minutes with one of our experts to see if you qualify for our support services. Link below in the description. So you're asking for a specific amount, you're gonna aim high based on your gut, you're just kind of starting with some amount. The next thing that we wanna do to help dial in that number, or at least test that number, is to look at, number 3, Peer information. These are the people that know them. So we can take information from board members or volunteers or people who are kind of in their inner circle, and we test that information saying, okay, well, I happen to know Jake. Tell me more about Jake. I think we're gonna ask Jake for $50,000. Do you feel like that's appropriate? It's like, well, I know Jake gave something like that to the church, or I know Jake supports his college that much every single year, so that actually might be low or something. For the record, I don't have $50,000 to support my college, but this imaginary Jake in this example does have $50,000, or that might be low. So we're going to rely on peer info. Really speaks to why it's important to have fundraising volunteers or some sort of a philanthropy council, people dedicated specifically to raising money for your nonprofit. And if you don't have that, at least board members, especially people who are kind of in your inner circle. Maybe it is a board member that you're going to ask, but you want to approach that person having talked to someone who knows them or someone who has information about them, so that we can get some kind of a gauge on that number. That should be able to push that number up or down. Again, if you don't have that, totally fine, but it just fills in one of those boxes, again, making that picture just a little bit more clear on how much you ask for. All right, number 4, if you have access to it, wealth screening. And of course, this is the automated database search where people have profiles. Sometimes your CRM or your donor database will have some kind of access to this sort of thing where you can put an individual and they get like a score, like, oh, they're a 4B or a 4A. Those things are mostly based on public record. So it's public donations, obviously. So you see that they're donated to another charity and that's public record. Somewhere it's published that they gave $1 million to so-and-so. So it's public records, public recording of gifts. The next thing that it pulls from is property value. And then of course, political donations. Those have to be public as well. So you kind of have this mixture of information here. And a lot of the times it's pretty accurate. Like, this is how much money they could give. This is how much money they like to give. It's pulling information from these things. A lot of the times it's not accurate. It's not accurate in the case that they don't have a lot of these. If there's not a lot of public records of their giving, if they live in a pretty modest house and living like kind of below their means basically, and they don't donate to political parties, it may say, hey, this donor is qualified to maybe give $10,000. But they're kind of the millionaire next door types, and they might be able to give 10 times that. It just, their wealth screening profile comes back a way that shows them not being able to do that. So the way that we look at this is there are plenty of false negatives. So it says they don't have a lot of money, and yet they do, but there are not that many false positives. If it's finding these things and saying they can give at this level, or they do give at this level already, or they own several large homes that are multi-million dollars each, that's hard to fake. So if it says they have a lot of money, they probably do. If it says they don't have a lot of money, you don't know if they do. So we just want to make sure that the qualifier wealth screening engines are roughly, based on the data, accurate like 60% of the time, 60% accuracy, which is fine. So it's, again, not a perfect accuracy. A lot of programs really live and die by the wealth screen. Like, this is the wealth screener tells me what to ask for and I go for it. Again, that is just one of those tiny little window panes across the whole picture. It is a good tool. You don't have to have this tool to be successful. Peer information, far more accurate, far more recent. Again, it kind of takes into factor, like, what do they like to give? What do they like to support? Oh, they just sold their business. Those things don't necessarily pop up on your wealth screening tool. So one tool in the tool belt, something that's helpful, but don't entirely rely on wealth screening as your way of determining that amount. And finally, number 5 here is history. We want to kind of create a profile on that donor based on A, their history with us, and B, their history with other giving. Just like the wealth screening engine is going to look at where else they put their money, we can do that manually. We can literally see what other charities in town, their college, their church, especially if they're publishing their donor records or they're putting recognition pieces out there, we know with full certainty, oh, okay, well, they last gave a $25,000 gift, so that should be the absolute minimum that we should ask for. Maybe they're more passionate about their church than they are about the animal shelter that we work for, and that's fine, but they do have the capacity to give. They're used to giving and making impact at the $25,000 level. So the first and easiest thing is, how much have they given to us? Have they given to us? It is not necessarily like, well, they've been giving $500 a year, so we should ask them for $500 because that's the amount they give. They might be giving $500 a year just to kind of test us out, see, what kind of recognition they get back. They want to learn more about the mission. Someone who gives 4, 5, 6 years in a row at $500 is often a wonderful candidate for a much larger gift. They just are looking for an opportunity for a bigger impact. Maybe they're responding to the annual giving mailing that they get sent out, and they just send it back with the maximum amount every year. And no one ever asked them in person, let's go talk to them. Let's go sit down and ask and see. So we want to kind of evaluate their history and see what kind of impact they want to make, and that gives us an idea of how much to ask for. Also, we want to Google their name, and the best way to do this is to Google their full name, in quotes, annual report, and then the name of the city or the community that you live. So again, name, space, and then in quotation marks, annual report, and then city. And that will typically pull up PDFs or sometimes published web pages of recognition lists. So you'll get a bunch at the top, especially if they're a typical giver. You'll be able to see, oh, they gave to the Humane Society and they're listed in the $10,000, $25,000 level. Sometimes that comes up with nothing, but if there are published annual reports, that's a really easy and free way to find those pretty much every time. When we're doing our prospect research for our clients, that's one of the first things that we do. So try that trick, see if you can find some of your donors on there. But based on their giving history, we can say if they've given to us repeatedly for a while, or if they're used to giving to others big or some larger level than they've been giving to us, we can use that as another piece to the puzzle to make our best guess. Okay, and here's how you put all that together. So again, we have all these different pieces of information. We've kind of walked through them all. You can do them in kind of any order, but you've gotten through these, and you got your grid here, and this is the photo of, you know, how much we can ask for. And we fill in this one because we do a well screening and we know a little bit more, and we ask a friend, that's the most important one, so that's the middle of the image. And then we've seen that they've given to somewhere else big. They've been giving to us for, you know, 4 or 5 years, and we just keep filling this in, and we get to a point where we go, okay, that's probably enough of the image to see and to take a pretty good shot. So we're going to look at this, and this picture gives us, you know, $25,000 plus, 25K plus, somewhere in there. Because we know we're supposed to ask high and ask specific, we're just going to ask for 50K. We're just going to do it. No, we have no loss by, instead of asking for 25, ask for 50. If that's too much, they'll take us back down. If it's the right amount, they'll take it. One of the sequences I like to use often when I'm asking is to not put the time frame in there as a place to start. So we say, hey, we'd love to have you consider a gift of $50,000, and not say pledged over 3 years or blah, 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 and just see how they react. If they're like, yeah, we can do $50,000 this year, you're like, God dang it, I knew we should have asked higher. We probably could have done 100. If they just decided on the spot and they can transfer it all in cash, we probably asked low. That's okay. We'll come back to them next year for something else specific to fund and can continue to scale their giving up. Not a huge loss. But if they're like, 50 is just a little bit more, I don't know if we can do that this year, or I'll have to talk about it. See, you know, we can say, hey, you know, most of our donors choose to pledge that over multiple years. You know, can I show you some options of what that might look like? We'll recognize you for the full 50,000 up front, but you can pay over the next 2 or 3 tax years. You can pay some from your business. You can give appreciated stock. We have all these options. Oh, okay, in that case, we might be able to do $50,000. So you kind of work your way into it that way. And that should give you a pretty good idea of how to safely always be working towards that. One final general tip is just to kind of try to always move people up a little bit. You know, if someone gave $1,000 last year, ask for $2,500, see what happens. So hopefully that's helpful. Try some of those out and get out there and raise a bunch of money. Hey, thanks for checking out our video. If you're ready to level up your fundraising program, Pride Philanthropy might be able to help. Our team helps raise over $100 million per year for dozens of clients all over the country. We train staff and volunteers, conduct feasibility studies, and manage multi-year campaigns. If you're looking for outside help to kickstart your program or rejuvenate your efforts, you can book a free 30-minute call with one of our experts to see if you qualify as a client of Pride. Visit pridephilanthropy.com or click the link below, and we'll see you over there.